Yes, we are officially ready to call the meeting to order.
All right, so we will call the meeting to order for the evaluation team for the invitation to negotiate for family resource centers proposing to be funded by CSC Leon. And our time is 2:02. And I'll ask Ms. Clay to call the roll.
I'll do it for the purposes of today. So we have Miss Laura Morolny. Present. We have Miss Brittany Beal. Present. We have Mr. Kayla Norris Barber. Here. We have Mr. Mike Torres. And we have Mr. Terrence Watt serving as our chairperson and connection to the CSC Leon board.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
So with that, I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Watts.
Thank you very much. And so we definitely appreciate everyone for your attendance here today. We do have an agenda that's in front of us, and do I need to go ahead and give an approval for the agenda?
Yes.
All right, so if we could have somebody motion to approve our agenda. Motion to approve the agenda. All right, Kayla Lewis Barber, motion, and second Laura Maroney. Thank you very much. So we will move forward, and then we're going to open it up for general public comment. Do we have any public comment cards?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. So next, that'll move us into our discussion around the ITN evaluation, our review and ratings. And I also want to say that evaluation member Mike Torres may possibly not be able to attend today. And so I believe his comments or feedback, he would able to be submitted directly to you, Ms. Holly. All right.
That's correct.
All right. So having done this before, ultimately, we do thank the team for your time and efforts in reviewing these proposals. And so ultimately, we will open it up for discussion. And Holly, I'll turn it back over to you if you want to facilitate through the scores or however you want to proceed.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Watt. So as you guys know, we issued an invitation to negotiate for Family Resource Center management. We opened the procurement in late March and we advertised it in multiple venues. It closed on Friday, May 5th. We did receive 2 responsive proposals. And what that means is that the responses that were distributed to you did meet our minimum qualifications to submit that application, to submit a proposal. And that's why it is advanced to you. I will take a moment for the purposes of the public record to review what the full intent of this procurement is before we launch into instructions as your role as evaluators on the first phase of a 2-part procurement process. So the truly the intent is to award a single contract or a single entity to establish and manage family resource centers located in targeted neighborhoods. That is the intent of this full procurement. Our hope is that the successful applicant will have at least 5 years of experience administering and managing family resource centers, adhering to a set of national standards, as well as using a strength-based approach to create and service resource hubs where families can access formal and informal support to promote family health and well-being. I'm reading directly from our published announcement. So if you see me reading, I didn't make myself the script. I'm just reading exactly what was published. We did include a draft statement of work detailing the expectations for the ideal successful applicant that was included in the application. Now, how the 2-part approach works is that this is an invitation to negotiate, which means we know loosely what we want, but we don't necessarily know what the full market is available for our community. So as opposed to issuing just a request for applications or a request for proposals, we purposely wanted to design a procurement process that allows us the flexibility to negotiate with whatever vendor we ultimately go with, so that the proposal that was initially submitted could look different from the final proposal that is accepted by the council. So the first phase of the evaluation process really is truly the work that you guys did. Looking over what was submitted and scoring based on what was submitted with the intent to shortlist, for lack of a better word, or to create a range of scores that are reasonably susceptible to move forward. What will happen today in today's meeting is that we're going to review those scores and have the opportunity for you to discuss those scores. In just a moment, we'll actually, before we dive into that, let you introduce yourselves to one another so that everyone understands the background from which you're coming. That way you might say, I noticed that you scored very high or very low in the same category, which was very different from me. Curious as to why. And you'll be able to have that debate and discussion. For purposes of the recording, each of you have been given a copy of your original draft submission with your scores and comments. At the end of that discussion, our what we call inter-rater reliability, we will collect those score sheets from you, including notation of any changes that you might make. At that point, we'll turn it back over to another discussion, because yes, one task is to finalize your scores. The second task is to decide which proposals, if any, move forward. You will have the ability to make a recommendation to move forward 0, 1, or 2 of the proposals to the next phase. And that will be a decision that will be facilitated by our chairperson, Mr. Watts, as we move forward. At the conclusion of that, you will have an opportunity just to make any just general comments at the end of all the deliberations, the decision making, or just your experience in the process. I will say, for the recommendation that you move forward, it is a recommendation. That recommendation is then presented to the council. The council is the full decision maker in this process. They will have the option to accept your recommendation, reject your recommendation, or make an entirely different decision. So please know that what you decide here and what you develop by consensus as your recommendation is not final. I say that to you guys as well as for the purposes of the recording, since this is a public meeting, that everyone knows that this process continues on. Should you choose to advance forward 1 or 2 proposals, that recommendation will then trigger the second phase of the evaluation process, in which your scores and your materials will then be shared with the negotiation team. We will contact any advancing proposals to schedule what we call like an interview or a negotiation. So just like we might be hiring someone, right? It's like that second interview kind of. You're the first glance, like the HR director, deciding who gets to come in for an interview. And so that will then be advanced to the negotiation committee. This is where your comments are very important, because your comments will go with your application or with the applications or the proposals, but you will no longer be able to participate in those negotiations. So leaving here today with whatever the decision is, if there's specific information that you want to pass forward to the next phase, make sure it's on that on your final submission that you're going to sign and give to the team before you leave. If your consensus recommendation is to not move any forward, again, that is a recommendation. That recommendation will be presented to the council. So in essence, that bypasses part 2 of the negotiation process, and it goes straight to the council. Again, even with that one, the council would then be able to make whatever, they can accept it, reject it, or make a different decision. Any questions? I know I just went through that fast. I know we covered it in our training. It was in your manual as well, but I just, for the purposes of the record, wanted to go over it again and ask if there's any questions about process, not substance. Seeing none. Thank you. We will, so what the materials you have in front of you and are a draft aggregate score sheet. For those who are watching, the final score sheet will be published on the website. There are copies available here for anyone who is in person and would like to participate, but the final one will be published on the website at the conclusion of today's meeting. How we'll kind of go through this is just allow everyone the opportunity. We'll take up each each proposal by tab number. One will be the Bethel Empowerment Foundation, 2 will be the Brownsville Preparatory Institute, and we'll go line by line and allow you to ask questions, to talk about why you scored the way that you scored. Please know that you don't have to say anything at all if you don't want to, but this is your opportunity to offer your insight on each of the individual tabs as we move forward. Okay, so first up is proposal number 1 from the Bethel Empowerment Foundation. They scored the composite score by average for organizational profile was an 11 out of a possible 15 points, a 29 for program design out of a possible 40 points, a 14 for program evidence out of a possible 20 points, and a 17 out of a possible 25 for budget. Their overall score was a 356 out of 500, which gives them an average score of a 71.2. At this point, I'd like to open it up for any comments on scores for tab number 1 in any of those domains.
I'll start the discussion off. Ultimately, when I review these proposals, I pretty much take them that they're a possible snapshot of, future what you may get from the organization, or possibly how they operate, possibly, or what you may ask for, as the CSC, and they are like a viewpoint of what you may get down the road. So I always start off with looking at these proposals from that lens. I will say for my scores, and I'll speak in the totality for all of the sections, the organizational, the program, program design, program evidence, and the budget. One thing that I feel like was a missed opportunity that kind of impacted my scores was in regards to there was reference to a lot of different programmatic things that they have engaged in over the years. They referenced Casey Foundation a lot as like a reference point to not necessarily validate, but articulate, why they would be a good fit for the Family Resource Centers based on what the CSC was asking for. And with the Casey Foundation, I'm very familiar with the Casey Foundation. And I know they referenced how, they were per se, get the language, maybe like mentioned or recommended by them. I found something from like 2016 that was referenced by Bethel and the Casey Foundation. But my thing is, there was a missed opportunity for data to show me how that Casey Foundation, your involvement with Casey Foundation, if they recommended you, and show me that data point. They referenced like how they were maybe able to assist with 50% reduction in foster care. Well, I would have liked to have seen data to kind of articulate how those measurements, how Bethel's programming, I think it was called Project Embrace at that time, impacted that 50%. So that kind of weighed heavily in regards to some of my scoring. Something else for Bethel Foundation, they had some great references, and even though Casey Foundation would not have necessarily fell in the criteria for what we asked for references points, I felt like, if there was this partnership, having something from the Casey Foundation to kind of articulate that partnership, even if it's still current, could have probably been helpful. The other thing with Bethel program design, I kind of felt that the information was rushed, and maybe there again were some missed opportunities to articulate through data how they were able to make some of the impacts they referenced in their proposal. Let's see what else. I'll pause there if anybody has any questions for me, what I've said so far on that. I have a few more comments, but.
So I forgot to ask you guys before you speak to introduce yourself. My apologies. I said that I was going to do that, and then I just dove right in. My apologies. But maybe as before you speak, you can just kind of let folks know, your peers know. My apologies on that one. I said I was going to do it. It was on my notes here, and I just skipped right on over it. I sure did.
I'm sorry. Well, I'm Terrence Watts.
And just provide like a little bit about your background, so that your peers know
Sure.
your operating.
Okay. Terrence Watts, and I work for the Department of Children and Families. I started with them in December 2003. Most of my background is in child abuse and neglect investigations, and then I moved up to management and now community development administrator for Circuit 2 counties and 6 counties here within the Big Bend region. So it's my background.
Thank you. So now maybe it won't be so intimidating. Introduce yourself and your feedback.
I feel intimidated just by sitting
We need
I'm Brittany Beal. I'm with Hancock Whitney Bank. I've been in banking for about 18 years. And so that's kind of the perspective that I'm coming from under the CHSP panels as well. So.
And I'm Lori Mulrooney, and I work for Safe Families for Children Florida. I'm a statewide engagement and collaborations person. And I've been involved in the nonprofit world for about 40 years. And have been with Safe Families for Children, started volunteering in 2016, launching a chapter here in Tallahassee, and then moved November 2021, was able to start working for them. So.
Kayla Norris, father. I'm an accountant by profession. My area of expertise is financial management and economic development. I'm a former director of the Office of Management and Budget for Leon County. I've been finance director, city manager in several municipalities in Florida.
Great. Now we'll go back to the conversation where Mr. Watts left off, related to comments and discussions about your perspective and the scores related to Bethel Empowerment Foundation.
I just wanted to add to Terrence's comments on the Casey Foundation. Bethel seemed to have been given an opportunity through them with the Building Communities of Hope, being able to look at possibly creating family resource centers, because I know that some other organizations in Florida actually were able to be designated as Building Communities of Hope projects and were able to build family resource centers. So it just seemed like that was, as you referred to, maybe a missed opportunity, but also it wasn't clear if they had received any funding. Was it just a recognition? Not sure what that was. And if they were still connected to them. It was interesting that that was part of the program design piece of this. So that kind of opened it up to be looking at that. Also, I was more in the financial piece of it. I kept focusing, my mind kept going to, I wasn't able to really tell if the funding they were asking for was supplanting other funding or part of their budget, because I could not, and maybe it's in here, I couldn't see clearly. I know that this is out of the church, and I know it said that the Bethel Empowerment Foundation was a separate ministry, but I don't know if that's a separate 501c3 and who is actually asking for the money. So if it was the church, I did not see a budget. I saw there was a balance sheet for the church, but not a budget for the church, if that's who's applying, and then not a budget for the Bethel Empowerment Foundation. So it was just trying to make sense of all of that. Also, I don't know if it was just mislabeled, but their profit and loss statement was from 2012, 2013.
Yeah, that's what I saw as well.
Yeah, so that seemed kind of interesting to me. So, and then not being able to compare the budget that they were asking for to their current budget, I can't really see if it was supplanting any. The other thing too is I've studied family resource centers for a long time. I love the whole concept of it. And so as I was looking at this, I was trying to imagine the program design that they had as really falling into what I envision family resource centers to be. And that's just based on the national standards and just based on studying family resource centers across the country. So I don't know if that makes sense. It's just that when you go to their program design and the 4 feasible locations, I love what they're doing with their mobile emphasis, but I'm not quite sure if that necessarily fits into my concept or national's concept of what a family resource center is.
And that's, yeah, that was something that I kind of, I mean, definitely with the profit and loss, the dates, that was kind of interesting. But I came to the question that I wasn't sure how much that they were describing was to build on and extend what they're already doing versus what I'm thinking that is more the aim is to do something a little bit new. Or, you know, at least to have these family resource centers in different areas to reach out, you know, to solve that problem of the transportation and the access, to be more in that community rather than, you know, primarily using facilities that they already have established. And, you know, just not really, it doesn't feel like what they're doing is so much something new as just extending the finance or financing is asking to build on what's already there. And again, too, I don't think anybody's trying to reinvent the wheel necessarily, because that's a very difficult thing to do. But I feel like this new project is something a little bit more than just building on what's already there. I think that's what the intent is when I'm kind of gathering it. So I did have some concerns with like the locations that they were proposing. I do think mobile access is a great idea, but that I don't think that can be the one and only extension from what's already in place.
I'll add on to, that was one of the things. So I actually thought it was a positive that they possibly had the bones of, if you will, a model for the family resource centers. But again, kind of a missed opportunity to make it very clear how that was not going to, you know, we were going to take this established kind of framework we had to create something new for a family resource center. So that I also felt like that was a missed opportunity. It was very mixed in. You kind of didn't know what was going to be new or possibly already funding something new. I'll give an example with the staffing plan. And one of the maybe positions they were looking at were childcare workers. So I definitely wasn't clear on that if they were looking at having childcare facilities at the family resource centers, but I think they already have childcare. So it just would, you know, I was kind of not necessarily clear on that as well with some of the staffing plans.
Can I just say one thing that kind of piggybacks onto what Terrence was saying too, is that it was not clear as to what they already had. I mean, there was some like a skeleton, but again, not sure what they were adding to make it a family resource center, how they were going to delineate that. But it was further confusing to me because there was lots of information in here about different projects that they did. And I wasn't sure exactly, like I wrote here on one, like the project MEEPS, like, was this something new that they were doing? Was it something that they were already doing? So anyway, that was a little confusing to me. I kept reading it over thinking, am I missing something?
Mr. Barber, before, can I let me just add to the MEEPS? I did have, you know, so the project MEEPS, you know, it did come across like a lot of ideas, but missed an opportunity to be clear and methodical. I was reading it as if maybe it was part of the proposal of something that they would create with funding, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, because it wasn't even in the program design piece, it was evidence of effectiveness piece. So it wasn't clear to me, was this something that they had already started, that they had already submitted to somebody else, that would have been good to know, because then that would have somehow would have strengthened it, but I wasn't sure. It just seemed like a lot of prior research, but not really fitting.
Mr. Garber?
Yes. For the most part, I put my comments. For the sheet. I thought it was a very selfish proposal because they do a lot. And they have these components, but all of the components are within the Bethel ecosystem. So the things that they are offering, mental health, the medical movement, all of those are components of Bethel. And from my reading, ITN, I envisioned that we would have somebody who would come in and manage a resource center and have multiple resource centers within the community. And I also thought that, maybe I'm wrong, that we would focus on the targeted zip codes. Is that correct? Help me understand. Okay, so, and because I actually work and service a lot of those folks through, and I forgot to mention that I'm a executive director of a nonprofit, do affordable housing, done microenterprise development. We also do an event called Frenchtown Rising in Frenchtown. And because I'm in the community a lot, I know that there are several existing organizations who provide family sources, something similar to a family resource center in the manner in which CSC was envisioned. Providence should have the AKAs have a set of Providence. In South City, we have STEM Center in Appalachian Ridge. In Griffin Heights at Springfield, there's a family resource center within Springfield Apartments. And we have the Peacock Center, which is a family resource center on Broad Street. So, and they are right in the heart of the community. For them to just not reference or include those resources that are already in the community, they just didn't do it. Right here. Then they threw goodwill in. And I'm like, okay, that's a great political move. I'm gonna get them some brownie points. The other issue was on the mobile units. For both programs, really. It wasn't clear to me whether they already had the mobile units, whether they purchased the mobile units, and reviewing their budget, I feel they couldn't really tell whether they were buying it, whether they were leasing them. I mean, so that just wasn't clear. And then for their outcome measures, and their logic model, they just weren't quantifiable, nor were they measurable. They count things, you know, we're gonna have this many classes, we're gonna do this many, that many, that. So that's good, you count things, but what's the outcome? And how do you measure the outcome? So those basically are my comments. Now, I want to call your attention to an organizational chart based on you all's comments. I just looked at this organizational chart, page 71. And they have an organizational chart that's color coded for the leisure that notes new positions and existing our current position. So I think if you review that, may answer some of your questions about supplanting.
It doesn't have anything listed with the Bethel Empowerment Foundation.
It's over.
I mean, disbursement. But not people, maybe.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, if you look at the chart with FL Empowerment Foundation, there's only, it says project director. But that's for the mobile medical unit.
What page?
The page that you're on.
Okay.
So it's just hard to tell, is that the only employee that's there? And who is that? And
Even for me with the chart, it's still.
Yeah.
From some of the things that were documented, even some of the position descriptions. When you talk about the mobile, so definitely the chart made that more confusing for me. But
how it was going to operate.
Yeah.
So the question would be, come at this point, based on this kind of discussion, and kind of have some of the consensus, when you look at your individual scores, do you feel comfortable with the scores that you've submitted, or do you want to make any revisions to the scores that you submitted? We have taken copious notes, so should this proposal advance to the next phase, this recording as well as our notes will go along with it. And then of course, any comments that you officially want to submit with yours. So kind of keep that in mind, but thinking specifically about the scores. Is there any revisions to the scores that you would like to make, or is there any specific questions you would like to pose to a fellow panelist?
I don't want to change any of my scores.
Do I?
I don't think I do.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. So what we'll do now, and we'll have the ability to still do some more discussion about making the decision of moving forward. That's not where we're at currently. But what we'll do now is we'll take up proposal number 2, the Brownsville Preparatory Institute. And that will, in very similar fashion, we'll go through the scores. We'll offer each of you the opportunity to share kind of your perspectives of why you scored the way that you did. And then we'll conclude that with determining if you want to make any revisions or ask questions of your peers. At that point, we'll make the score sheets final. Then we'll move on to the discussion of that next task that is before you. Okay. So with proposal number 2, we had a aggregate score or composite score of 7.6 for organizational profile and on a scale of up to 15 points. For program design, it was a composite score of 20 from a scale for up to 40 points. Program evidence, 8.6 up to 20 points. And the budget was a composite of an 8 with up to 25 points available. In total, they scored, the draft score is a 220 out of a scale up to 500, giving them an average score of 44.0. At this point, we will open it up for discussion of scores.
So for me, I don't have to talk, but if it's silent, I will talk. That is my. So I don't want you to think I'm like, I just got something to say. I just give them up and I read the room and then we go to get the conversation. So don't feel like I need to start. Go ahead.
No, you know.
You sure? So with this particular okay, so category 1, organizational profile. Let me see, overall on this particular proposal, I had a few questions that led to some of my low scoring. And one is partnership. Partnership, timeline, and locations. I'm gonna skip past the organizational profile. I'm gonna come back because I got a question for you, Mr. King. So some of my concerns with the program design, when you talk about the partnership of how they look at implementing the Family Resource Center, I had questions around the one particular partnership that they were looking for with, I think it's ESR. And so ultimately, if I'm assuming this would now be looking at like a subcontractor per se to provide, it actually was on the financial thing, but services of outreach and case management services. So right away that, and I went to their website, but right away that was kind of a barrier for me to really understand how they would kind of meet the needs of a family resource center and what that looks like. Should we have more information in the proposal about DSR if they're going to be providing such a significant role to the family resource center model that they proposed? So that was something that was was kind of a barrier for me. The timeline and location. So this funding, I think, is for up to 4 years. Is that, am I using that language right?
Up to 26
26
months.
Up to 26
So it would be a 26-month contract to fund at minimum of 2
Sorry,
FRC.
the 4 I'm getting is the 4 million, up to 4 million
Correct.
for the 26 months,
That
right?
is correct.
And so with the timeline and location, and with their financials, I think they were at a 3.5. I'm rounding up there, a 3.5 estimate, and I just was like, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. I feel like there was a lot of possible liability. If you're maybe thinking about the first year, actually letting that inform kind of your decision around pilot. Like we're gonna pilot that first year and then kind of make a determination from that pilot phase of maybe what we need to do differently for the next family resource centers that we build out. And I think that it might be setting potential up for I don't want to use the word failure, but that timeline was definitely pushed me. I'll give you an example, like the needs assessment. I think we're gonna use like the first 3 months. I would like, there is so many legitimate sources out right there that can tell you what the needs are for the different zip codes. I would actually like to have seen that in the proposal, like go ahead and set that tone. Like we already know in this zip code, this is what this data supports X, Y, Z. So that timeline was impacting some of my decision on this, as well as the partnership with DSR, Public Health, and having more information in the proposal around that. I'll pause there. Well, let me ask my question now.
Okay, go ahead.
So on the financials, there was like a cash advance section. Okay, and I'm wondering if, you know, I tried to look, and I know like for some groups that's, you know, that's not uncommon for some organizations or whatnot. But does that look like it's actually a loan that's being made out to staff members? How I read that, or do we think that's, or do we think that's?
Think about their current financials.
If they're-
Basically, it was
Balance
like
sheet.
advanced salary to a couple of certain amounts of people.
So I couldn't tell if someone can say if that was that, or sometimes, you know, you can, I think.
It's about getting a reference. or-
Oh.
Yeah, it's in the balance sheet, page 5 out of 7 on Travis.
So I was wondering about that, or if that's like something around travel. Sometimes you give somebody reimburse travel ahead of time. So I just wasn't sure on that. My question would be if it is a loan that is happening. Just, you know, I would have liked to see what are some of the policies or whatever in the proposal of how you pay those back. Or
It's in the management report.
right.
I would, okay, actually, it's in the asset section, so it's not a,
It's-
Okay.
It's the balance sheet.
yeah, so it's employee cash advances. They book it as an asset and, I'm not sure.
Well, it's almost like accounts payable.
Because they have to
That's
pay
what
that.
I- yeah.
That's what I was thinking, but I was,
It's more like, I don't know, more of a receivable maybe. But I don't know how they classify an advance as an asset.
Well, it's something that's owed to them.
It's
Yeah.
up to them, yeah.
So it's not something that they-
Yeah. Need to wear.
So I'm reading that like a advance on salary.
okay.
That's how I interpreted it.
And the only reason I'm going with that, like I say, I know there's a lot of companies and things that I believe actually do that. I would just like to have, to clarify what that means, especially if you're talking about us. You know, if that's a practical policy, I think it could be useful to know what.
There were a lot of things in the profit and loss statement that stood out to me. Just being in banking, $27,304 in credit card processing fees is
Almost.
crazy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should tone that down, but that's substantial, especially when you take into account like percentage wise to their income. I'm just like, that's unusual. That's all I'm gonna say. That really stood out to me. Are a big piece of, I think both of these.
It may not be that bad if they're using something like Square or one of those.
It's like the five, I mean, just take, yeah, it's like 4 to 5%, depending on it, especially if you look at how much of their income is actually being processed in that manner.
And that must be from tuitions, right?
That's, I'm guessing is it's the tuition express payments is my guess. There's just nothing, I have some questions about that. Just in general. But I think with both proposals, I think training is gonna be a big piece of this. And the fact that they spent $360 according to this in training is concerning. Because I think at least in the other proposal, I think the national standard training was like $15,000 a year. And I also didn't see any line item in the budget for the actual project for training. I might have missed it. But I don't recall seeing any of the allocations being to training, which I think is something that's gonna be necessary for anybody who takes up this project. So that was concerning.
I was concerned that there's no budget, right? I mean, they have the profit and loss statement. But they don't have that's on a budget. Profit and loss. No, but the budget for the proposed, but where's their budget for their organization? And again, I couldn't get past some of the things that you mentioned, Terrence, the $925,000 for outreach case management services, and yet I kept going back here and trying to figure out, okay, what that's not explained anywhere. I mean, they describe a little bit about what DSR does, but not what they're going to do with that $925,000 annually. I also was a little, and maybe I just don't know, but $800,000 for marketing and media development. That just seemed a little high.
And I mean, I guess just addressing the budget as well.
For no plan, like there's nothing in here that describes what they're going to do. It just says marketing and media. Well, it does say website development, but I don't know, it just doesn't seem like that's part of I didn't see that as part of the program design.
Quite frankly, when I didn't see enough detail for me to think I wouldn't be doing that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just the overall, so for the Family Resource Center, their budget's $3.7 million. And when you've got $1.85 million going to another organization, is concerning. And also, just from what I was able to gather, DSR's area was more of like public health services, which were important. But I feel like the Family Resource Center is something, sure, it'll encompass some health issues, but that's not the end all be all of what that's supposed to provide. And to have basically half of the funds dedicated to, from what I can gather, is a purely health, like medical health based. I don't know that it's encompassing what this project is supposed to be provided to.
With no family resource.
To their clients, yeah. I feel like this is something that's a more holistic approach, and to have the budget dedicated to one section or one piece of it, it's just not balanced.
With the DSR, so with the proposed, it is.
Would have been great to know more about them.
Yeah. Well, and with the proposal, I came to an assumption. I had the question that you just expressed with Bill, and I came to an assumption, but you shouldn't have to per se do that with the proposal. So when I went to the website, they do offer like consultations things of that nature. And I thought maybe if I look at the staffing plan, were they possibly maybe gonna subcontract them to maybe do some of the, if you will, Family Resource Center positions, run some of, from their level of expertise, but they would actually have staffing position on top of the, but anyway, I just was. The locations also concern me. How they would meet that need. Again, they also, like Mr. K articulated about the mobile unit and the cost that they had for that on the, I struggle with this. I will say, I was looking for, because your proposal doesn't have to be big, right? And so, in starting off, I was looking at, and I felt like the bones were starting to get there when they started articulating the measurement and data points they've been able to accomplish in their current framework for their school. I was looking for that to likely inform how they would take that model of how they've been, so impactful with their current model, how they were going to bring that over to the Family Resource Center model, tie those two together. Like that's what I was hoping I was about to see, and then just kind of went on. So I did have a few barriers there.
This may be picky. I'm a detail-oriented person. I'm a word person as well. The support letters that were included in the first section, the wording was like identical. There were maybe a couple sentences here and there that was changed, but like I almost felt like there was a letter that was sent out and said, "Hey, are you willing to sign this?" and make a few tweaks here and there. It just didn't seem it's very personal. Whereas the ones in the other proposals seem very directed and kind of multifaceted about how some other organizations have interacted with Bethel, whereas this was just very. I didn't gather anything from this.
I didn't see that they had experience at all. From my knowledge of them, they do daycare and some basic, do they go to 5th grade?
Up to third grade.
Third grade. And
Yeah, the location thing, I think the mobile unit was really the only thing that they concretely proposed.
they're also attached to the church as well.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell they were attached, they were just using
that as a venue.
Oh, yeah. That's all right.
Okay, so.
Wait, so that's discussion. Again, we've taken copious notes about this, should this proposal move forward. Your score sheet as well as the notes and this recording would go along with it, as well as your notebooks once you turn them in. At this point, we will discuss, does anybody want to submit any revisions to their scores before making them final based on our discussion?
No.
I'm just gonna change that my comment, there wasn't, what I meant here was that there was no current budget, but balance sheet. So it makes it seem like I'm saying there was no profit and loss and balance sheet.
Got it.
So that's all, I just want to change.
So just make that notation under the sheet.
But I don't wanna, but my scores are.
Perfect. So at this point then, based on the discussion, no changes to scores will be submitted. Ms. Maroney is noting that she'll change her formal comment. If you'll please sign the bottom of your sheet and we'll go ahead and make those final. Just gonna pass them that way towards Jacinta, so that then we can move to the second task at hand. At which point I'll remind you of your of what the objective is, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Watts to facilitate discussion. So I'll let everyone just take a moment for signing before passing down to the flag.
Holly, I should know this, maybe I should, maybe this. But how many were actually submitted?
I wanted that.
Sure. So we had our public opening last on Friday the fifth. And we received 2 responses. They were the 2 and both of them were deemed responsive. So so that's all. We did not receive any others that were found to be ineligible. So now that we have made the proposals final, your range of scores in that you see are the 356, the 220, or if you prefer the average score of the 71.2 and the 4.0. It is now your purview to make a recommendation on if should 1, 2, or 0. So if 1 or more or none move forward. That is kind of the decision of the group. So before we go into discussion, if there's any procedural questions, I will take those.
Yes, this is maybe procedural because it's going to influence my decision. And that what happens in the negotiation phase. So I mentioned all of the family resources that are in the target zip code that neither of the proposals reference. So during the negotiation phase, who is negotiating and saying, these resources out there, can you include them in your?
Yes, sir. So that's exactly what could happen during a negotiation. So what will occur at the conclusion of this is should you choose 1 or more of the proposals to move forward, this recording, as well as any of the notes that you have submitted, clearly those particular notes are not listed on here. However, in our notes that staff have taken, we have documented each of those, and we give those to the negotiations committee, our team. The negotiation team will then host a couple of strategy sessions that will be recorded but not broadcast. So it would kind of go into a tone of silence where they're considered closed strategy sessions, where they brainstorm and say, these are all the questions that we want to have them come prepared to ask. This is kind of our strategy of what we want to see. Then they'll host those negotiations, allow them to do a presentation. There's some questions and answers that they can go back and forth. Then the negotiation team will go back into a strategy session and determine, did they get the answers that they want? Did that situate some other things? Are there very specific things we want to ask for? For example, to your point, there are existing resource hubs that are out there. We want to have an intentional inclusion of them in your proposal, at which point we bring them back in. The negotiation team will bring them back in and say, we want to give you the opportunity to submit a best and final. In essence, resubmitting their proposal based on the very specific things that through our conversations we have learned. Sometimes the best and final could be your proposal, your budget is too high. We want you to come down lower. You didn't include these resources. Why? Your organizational chart for supplantation is not clear. Make it better. They will be given those kind of very specific guidance. And then whoever the 1 or the more would submit a best and final back to the team. They review that version. And then that team will determine if it's 1 or more. Should they, or is the best and final now recommended for an award? That recommendation would then go to the council. The council has the ability to accept it, reject it, or make some other decision. But that's the process. So that was a really long-winded answer to say yes. That is something that could take place during negotiations.
But would any of the questions that we had or the items that we pointed out, that budgets, current budget compared to the proposed, but would that be included at all or no? Like,
so this recording and all of our notes will be given to the negotiation committee. It is their purview to determine whether or not to pass those forward into that next phase. I would like to say yes, I think that they will, but ultimately
it's their decision.
Yeah.
Correct. Now, the good news is, and this is intentional, one of your team members goes on forward to the negotiation team, and that is Mr. Watts. So he's serving on both, and that's intentional by design so that those concerns that you are discussing here can carry forward. Most of the time, these types of teams do lead by consensus. So if Mr. Watts gets there and the consensus is those questions don't need to be answered, I don't see that happening, but like, should that happen? That's a purview to go by consensus.
What if we decide to not move any of these?
Sure.
What happens to family resource centers and that whole?
That's a great question. So what happens is that there is canyonized in the Florida statutes is what something is called a reject all, and you can choose to not advance any forward. And that would be a recommendation. Should that be the will of this group to say, we don't want to advance either one of these forward, our recommendation to the council is reject all and re-advertise, or take no action, and you can just say reject all and go into a market research phase. There's a couple of different options for that, but in essence, that would be a recommendation to not advance any of them forward. And that's the recommendation to the council that would pause proceedings until the council weighs in. In essence, what that means is that it would not automatically kickstart phase 2. Instead, phase 2 being the negotiation team, instead it would go to council. Our next council meeting is actually this Thursday. It would be likely that Mr. Watts would amend the published agenda to add a new agenda item to provide an update from this committee that the recommendation was to not advance any of the proposals currently and to re-advertise or empower staff to retweak or to clarify very specific things in the proposal, whatever that formal recommendation ends up being that you make, to do that. The council would then either they'd have the option to accept that recommendation, reject that recommendation, in which case it would be it would come back to you. We would reconvene and say, nope, they said make a recommendation, or whatever the council says, it would bring it back to you. Or they can make a different decision. They could, should you reject all, they could say, you know what, let the process play out. We're going to reject that. Or what we're going to decide is to advance both of them and take it to the negotiation team. They could do that.
So they can override.
The final decision-making power rests wholly with the council, not with staff, not with this team, not with the negotiation team.
So you mentioned market research. Could that include identifying who's already doing something similar? And maybe you've already done some of that already, but who's already doing family resource center like projects, initiatives, and then somehow maybe tweak the RFA or the intent to negotiate.
That's typically what happens. So from a procurement perspective, if you, and I'm going to use the statutory language, even though it sounds pretty abrupt, but in essence, it's if you reject all and re-advertise, that means that no changes are made to the procurement instrument, and it keeps the cone of, I'm going to call it the cone of silence, closed. It keeps the procurement process closed, in which case it would just be right, we're going to re-advertise. In essence, it's going to like we're reopening it. I like to think of it in kind of HR terms, from the perspective of you have your position description, you're not changing your position description. Now you're just going to re-advertise your position description, right? It doesn't necessarily, sometimes they say, current applicants need not apply. That does not hold true. If a current applicant would like to reapply, they can reapply with a different procurement. But what it does is it keeps the current cone closed. And what I mean by that is that the books that you've read, they stay closed and not, they're in the shade, so to speak. They don't become public record until the full procurement closes. If you make the decision to reject all and reformulate a procurement instrument, the ITN, that in essence closes this procurement as a reject all, it's done. And then the direction to staff is to make a new one. And that's kind of like you would open that, whatever, if it's for market research or you want to make these specific changes, that means that this bid is closed and the submissions become public record, but that allows staff to then reformulate a procurement offer, or the council to reformulate a procurement opportunity.
One other thing I want to add is that it's important to keep in mind that the council very painstakingly and we believe a nice amount of money had an entire needs assessment done. And so that was used to help inform the ITN. And then secondly, the thought was, and I believe the ITN did, not require, but definitely encourage applicants to do the research that would be necessary so that you brought proposals that showed why these particular zip codes, why this particular area. I want to say the exact wording was look at things that are existing institutions, schools, other centers that are existing as you make that decision. So just to reiterate, it's either go back with what you have or shut it down and start all over again. And so literally it would be shutting down and starting all over again. Let me say, no dog in the fight. And I mean that because it's important that we get what we want and that we honor the time that you all took. So I did want to be sure to put that out there. So that we don't end up in a situation where we are duplicating what we've already done. That's my concern.
Any other additional procedural questions for that before we launch into facilitating discussion, research? And as we go forward, if you have procedural questions, by all means, you can ask them. I know that we're running this fairly formal. I mean, at the end of the day, we are respecting the procurement laws and the open meeting laws, and all of that. So we are being intentional about the flow of the meeting. But if you have questions, we can certainly answer them as you go through the process. So with that, I would like to turn it back over to Mr. Watts to facilitate discussion. Again, your task is to come up with a recommendation by consensus for the next steps to take.
First, thank you. First, I do want to let you guys that have volunteered to be part of the evaluation team, my position, which is I will support you all as a community with what you all want to do. I'm going to give my opinion, but I'm going to let you know that I will support in this totality what you all would like to do. And for me, if I look at typically how if I look at the average scores of 71 and a 44, and I just, my opinion would be to not move it forward. I think that a lot of the discussion that we have held today, I don't know that it's entirely fair to the negotiations team to, try to tackle all of those things. I just feel like, there's an opportunity to hear this feedback, those who have submitted proposals. And, if we choose not to move forward, close it and reopen it, that window is there to, update or address some of the things that we discussed today. However, with that said, I will support whatever you all like to do. So,
I've had I don't know if it's a pleasure, but I've had the experience sitting in on most of the council meetings and have gone through and watched how you all have scored proposals in the past. So looking at the scores, each time that the council has established a threshold to fund programs, 70 was the threshold. Therefore, it's just above the threshold. I propose that.
May I ask how long the time period was, as far as the ITN preparation from start to finish?
Starting, I would say that we've been discussing the family resource of the first time that it was presented as a viable option was with the publication of our needs assessment.
She needs.
She's right.
The first, so as a procurement opportunity was June of last summer. It was then written into a strategic framework after a workshop as one of the procurements that staff was suggesting as an option to council. That was first presented in October of last summer or last fall. And then as a formal kind of instrument with a statement of work and all of that, the first draft was presented in, I think it was February 6th, it was approved. Then in March, it officially opened. So the draft was in February. That had all of the pieces into it, and then the official opening date was on March 31st, and they were given just shy of 6 weeks to submit an application. So it would close on May 5th. But the discussion of what family resource centers are, the national standards associated with them, that the Annie E. Casey Foundation has been played a large part of, including how we came up with the budget. Was largely informed by the Annie Casey Foundation, also included in our needs assessment. So I know that was a lot more detail from start to finish in terms of the market research.
Yeah, I thought you were only interested in the IT.
So the actual open date was March 31st. And it was advertised on a variety of platforms, including the state vendor system.
It was on the state.
Yes, ma'am, it was, and we also did share it with the family support, like the National Family Support Network. We did share it with them to please distribute to their partners. Now, did they? I don't know, but it was shared with them as well.
Additional.
I'm just surprised that
Well, just additional to that, we hold information sessions for all of our procurements. And I think that information session, we probably had 8 or 9 different organizations represented. So we feel like there was
Interest and knowledge.
and knowledge. And we go through in the informational session, the ITN from the beginning to the end, the rubric, the entire process.
Were you saying to just reopen it and send new applications or just sending it back to, I can't remember the terms you used, but.
So there's the reject all and re-advertise, which means
Is that
we
what
just
you were?
reopen it, or it's a reject all and start completely from scratch.
I'm touring between the re-advertise and maybe recommending just Bethel. My only concern with that, I think what you alluded to, is that if I'm feeling that on the fence about Bethel, I don't know if it's fair to negotiation team's time to spend on that. Whereas maybe there would be other organizations that if we reopened would apply. And might be able to, yeah, including Bethel reapply. I just don't know if it's worth
So-
pushing forward or not at this time.
Well, let me say this. It's important to listen to the options when you say reject all and start over or close it down and reissue it.
Re-advertise, yeah.
Because if we close it down and reissue it, which is fine, this all closes down and the applicants they will not see or get any of this information, will they?
No, it will be, so if you.
Which one is it where you?
So reject
You
all
protect
and
the cone of
re-advertise.
silence, that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to
Reject
get
all
to.
and re-advertise, the cone of silence is protected and the procurement stays active. If you reject all and reissue, right, this one closed down and we start a whole new process, whole new evaluators, whole new everything. In essence, start everything over. And it's a nuance in terms of if these proposals in essence become public record or not.
That's where I was trying to go.
And so if you're saying we just re-advertise, then these organizations will know essentially what to
These do not become public record if we're.
Well, the scores.
The scores do, because they're already,
Yeah.
they're already, up, and if they're tuned in.
Have the opportunity to.
Yeah, if they're tuned in, yeah.
Correct, but what that means is, let's just say organization F, who has been watching these, they don't have access to see the proposals that have already been submitted
Right.
if you just re-advertise. If you reject all and reissue, that opens it up, we take these and we make them public record available to anybody, including organization F. Including each other's, right? So Bethel could see, Bethel could see Brownsville could see Bethel's applications in essence. So that's the term of art. I know that they're not, like, they're slightly nuanced, but that's just what's kind of statutes.
And what was yours? You said.
Well, we'll support with the
Re-advertise.
group, yeah, but I would. Yes,
Re-advertise or reissue?
your first option that keeps the code.
Okay. Re-advertise.
So they won't even know. Will they know?
Well, this is.
This is public. Anybody in their spare, right? Went to them, they see you. It's public, it was publicly noticed,
So they would have the opportunity to readdress some of the things that
that is
are
correct.
unclear or.
If they choose to.
If they
Yes.
choose.
If either applicant chooses to reapply.
And I would also say that if you just re-advertise, the current applications, like, would stay like in the cone, if you will. They wouldn't be dismissed. Does that make sense?
Yes,
If they do not, so they would have the opportunity to rescind their current application
Yes, I could.
and submit a new one
Mhm.
if we re-advertise. And if we reissue, they can still apply to the reissuance as well. If they choose not to rescind it, it would stay in the mix as is.
And they would be told that though. Or
Correct,
see,
correct.
whatever, discussed.
Yes, there will be,
They would
no matter
receive
what,
formal notification.
regardless of whatever decision is made today, they will receive formal notification tomorrow of whatever, just whatever recommendation is made, they will receive that information.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I want to just note, I mean, there's some good things in some of these, I mean, both of these proposals, just. Some refining, I think, would, especially when you're talking about up to $4 million. To
And
move
we-
an important project like this forward, I feel like it needs a little bit more confidence in moving forward.
When you re-advertise, because of that cone, does that still, where would new people find guidance? Would that be through? I mean, they have the intent to negotiate, but would they have any other that was provided, any other videos or guidance?
Well, everything
Everything's done.
is, yeah, it's still there. We've got our capacity building that is still available and would become available as well. So it kind of goes back to what we had, but all the videos, all of that stuff is up on YouTube.
Correct. The only things that would change is the timeline so if we re-advertise, we would reissue a timetable. And that would include a new informational session, a new period for Q&A, and then a new closing date. So, but the guts, other than the timeline table, that would remain exactly the same.
And we would go back and look at how that affects our spending plan when feasibly we would go to contract if there were a successful candidate. Yeah, so we would have to go back and look at that.
Okay, that's
Off the bat. We're just thinking off the bat, we could still be cheap. That was my thinking.
it would probably
Be
would
into the
likely be in
next-
October or
next fiscal
November,
year.
not January. Yeah, so I mean, there is a timeline consideration for sure, because we have to give ample time, but that would be a council decision. I wouldn't put that pressure on this committee. I think that the question that you asked is,
Oh, if you reissue, how long will it take you guys to get your?
We'd have to go back and look at the timeline, but I did want it, but it would probably be, we would be looking at going to contract on whatever happened after the beginning of the new fiscal year. But it's important, yeah, but it's important to understand this is not use or lose funding.
So what was
So
what was the plan
it's
now?
there.
When-
It's not-
when
the
you got
plan-
off on the contract? This-
We would have gone so that we had a contract executed in August.
So.
Yes,
So now-
but again, I wanted to say that because I believe that you put it all out there. That's really, you all don't need to worry about that because like I said, the money is not use or lose. It rolls over and we move into a new place, but I do think it's important. I'm just a person who believes that you just know all the facts. Then you make a decision. That's the least, the very least of the concern. And
So,
concern isn't even the right word, consideration.
so any other comments or positions? I just look like Mr. K, but I know it's Mr. Barber. So Mr. Barber. So Mr. Barber, your position, point of view is to still move, Bethel forward,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Because they're 1.2 over 70. Yeah, I'm feeling reject all and re-advertise
With the cone,
with.
using that as the
Yeah,
definer,
with
the cone of silence.
Yeah, not
that's
part of-
closed, okay.
Answer,
Mhm.
but agree with. Said.
And that's where I'm at as well, with the re-advertise.
So. Holly Sika, so what is the specific terminology? Well, let me just. Mr. Barber, anything you wanna add to that?
I don't have fantastic argument for moving forward.
Okay.
I gave my perspective.
Okay. So I think it's a good opportunity to choose the path because it gives them an opportunity. They are still, I think everybody has wants to do that. I think we're valid. That could really clarify and make them stronger proposals. So what's the language I need to use?
I would
Yes.
say one thing, that's not, this is just personal.
Yes.
You know, when I first drafted ITN, I said to myself, you know, this looks like this is just for some organization of the county. Because of the reference to the experience.
It's because it's not right.
that's the microphone right there.
Well, it's right there.
It is a big cone, but yeah, which is great.
I thought that just geared toward an organization from our town because of some references to the experience with CSCs. And obviously, CSC is new. So, that observation.
So what's the language that I need to use to?
For a formal recommendation, kind of hearing what you're saying, it would be a reject all and re-advertise, granting the current applicants the ability to reapply.
Okay.
I think that covers it. It's very clear that it preserves the integrity of the current code of silence, which means it would protect this current applications from not becoming a part of the public record. It would allow the current applicants to reapply. It makes this conversation about clarity of the direction that we're really looking for and things that we're looking for available to anybody and everybody. What it does not do is change the instrument in which the procurement was published other than the timeline. So that's what it preserves, is that the intent as originally designed, the things we asked for as originally requested, all stays, but this gives us an opportunity in essence to reopen it to as our legal counsel said, shake the tree a little bit more.
Okay, let me ask one other follow-up to that. As far as the evaluation team, they would need to stay the same, or you would have to have a whole new apply to?
It would stay the same because it is going to be part of that current process. So we would ask that your, the NDAs and the confidentiality agreements that you signed stay the same. We would send that to the negotiation team as well, that those that have been appointed, it just changes the timeline. Now, once the new timeline is established and if those dates do not work for you and we have to seek alternates, you would just need to send a declination that you can no longer participate. However, the NDA that you signed, the confidentiality agreement that you signed stays in effect until the procurement closes. With the new timeline, that may be October, it may be January, it may be 4 weeks from now. So just kind of keep that in mind, and we will continue to communicate with you throughout every step of the process to let you know about when the cone of silence is lifted.
The one additional procedure, as I'm thinking about it, Mr. Torres, who is an evaluator, would us not having his feedback impact our ability to make any type of recommendation right now? Would we need his feedback or need to give them the opportunity to have his feedback before making a decision?
No, because your committee was noticed and the majority of you are present.
Okay.
So you do have the authority to take action today without his presence.
Okay,
And the scores of the superintendent.
okay,
Oh, they were.
And he, when he,
Yeah,
he
Scores.
shared- and when he did share, and he, for, for purposes of the record, he did communicate that he had a meeting pop up and that he was not sure that he was going to be able to attend, and he apologized. But he did do the work of reviewing and submitting his scores.
okay. All right, yes. So what's next?
So you need to formally
Okay.
say.
I formally recommend that we reject all recommendations, reject all and re-advertise.
He said,
I mean,
I in the least sense of the word.
exactly.
Yes, okay.
We reject all and recommend re-advertising. That coincides.
The ability.
We recommend, so hold on.
Yes, go ahead.
We recommend
Yes,
that the council reject all and re-advertise, allowing the current applicants to reapply.
we recommend that the council reject all, re-advertise,
Re-advertise.
allowing all applicants to
reapply.
reapply.
Okay. Is there any discussion related to the short list of proposals or the recommendation before moving to the next agenda item? Seeing none, you are now on agenda item number 7.
Okay, so do we have any additional team member comments?
In regards to.
Training brother.
To vote on it, because that's already.
It's a consensus recommendation. Okay. Yeah,
In
so
regards to.
this is in general about the process. Did you like it? Looking forward to more. Man, this was really tough. Don't like this. Never call me again. Things like that. It's just your opportunity to say anything to the team, to everyone.
You guys did a very good, efficient move swiftly, a lot faster than I thought.
I enjoyed being part of it, all of it, being able to just read, what other organizations are proposing or their thoughts, and being able to give comment to that, and so.
Well, I'll do my usual spill, which is tell your friends, tell your family, tell your friends, tell your neighbor that it's important that they participate, especially if they own property, because they are investors in all of these services, and we are always needing voluntary evaluators and negotiators. We just appreciate you all work so much. It's not done, so we hopefully everything will work out and you'll be able to be back with us. But we really appreciate it, and do not take
Do you want these back?
So my final words would be, please give your books back. Please make sure that Jacinta, if you did not give her your signed sheet, that you give her that. Please remember that your confidentiality agreement stays in place even as you walk out here and talking.
This back as well, or?
Is that the signed one?
No, it's not.
No.
So we have to continue to not talk.
Yes, continue to not talk to anyone. If you use Post-it notes or sticky notes or your own private stuff, make sure that those are not exhibited in your packet and they turn them in.
I have notes in the margin or something like that.
All right. it's perfectly fine. We just want to say thank you again for volunteering, and we will be in touch about next steps for when we may, for when we will reconvene after the council. We'll let you know what is the council decides on Thursday, if they uphold your recommendation or revise it or change it or whatever. And then we'll let you know what the next steps are. Okay.
And so with that, we